In 2013, a television network ran a poll after one of their biggest shows of the year. The question was simple. Do you believe Megalodon, the largest predatory shark to ever exist, is still alive somewhere in our oceans today? 70% of viewers said yes. Here's the part that should stop you. The entire show they just watched, the researchers, the evidence, the dramatic footage of a boat supposedly getting destroyed by something enormous. None of it was real. Not 1 second of it. Today, we're going to look at where this myth actually came from, what real scientists actually know about Megalodon's extinction, and why, once you understand the science, the idea of it hiding somewhere down there becomes a lot less likely. And honestly, a lot more interesting than the original myth ever was. Let's start with the show that started all of this. In August 2013, Discovery Channel kicked off Shark Week with something called Megalodon, the monster shark lives. It looked exactly like a real documentary. Scientists in lab coats, field researchers on boats, a marine biologist named Colin Drake calmly explaining the evidence. Except Colin Drake doesn't exist. He was a fictional character played by an actor named Darren Meyer. Every single researcher in that special was an actor reading a script. The video evidence of a boat getting attacked off the coast of South Africa? Completely fabricated. There was no boat. There was no attack. There was, technically, a tiny disclaimer buried at the start and end of the broadcast saying the events were dramatized. Almost nobody saw it, and almost nobody who did took it seriously because the rest of the hour was presented with total, straight-faced confidence. Discovery Channel got so much backlash that actual marine biologists went on record just to say, on the record, how absurd the whole thing was. One researcher at the University of Miami put it bluntly, there's about as much real scientific debate over Megalodon hiding in our oceans today as there is over mermaids, which is to say none. And yet, the network brought the same fake special back the very next year, because the first one worked. It got millions of viewers, and apparently that mattered more than the truth. So let's actually answer the question those fake scientists never properly did. What does the real evidence say? Here's the first piece, and it's bigger than people expect. Sharks lose teeth constantly throughout their entire lives, growing replacements in rows, like a conveyor belt. Over the roughly 16 million years Megalodon existed, that adds up to an almost unimaginable number of teeth scattered across ocean floors worldwide. Paleontologists have found thousands of them. Every single one is older than 1.5 million years. Let that sink in for a second. If Megalodon were still out there, even in small numbers, hidden somewhere in the deep, you'd expect at least one tooth, somewhere, dated more recently than that. In over a century of searching ocean sediments specifically for shark teeth, not one has ever turned up. And it's not just teeth. A shark the size of Megalodon, somewhere between 40 and 60 feet long, needs an enormous amount of food just to survive. We're talking about an animal that regularly hunted whales. If something that size were actively feeding in modern oceans, scientists would expect to find evidence. Bite marks on whale carcasses, unexplained predation patterns, something. There's none. Nothing in the fossil or biological record younger than that same 1.5 million year mark. Now, here's where but the ocean is mostly unexplored argument usually comes in, and it sounds reasonable on the surface. People love pointing out that something like 95% of the ocean remains unmapped, so maybe Megalodon is just out there somewhere we haven't looked yet. Except, this is where the actual biology quietly destroys the theory. Megalodon wasn't a deep ocean animal. Fossil evidence consistently places it in shallow coastal waters, the kind of environment where it could find the dense whale populations it needed to survive. It wasn't built for the crushing pressure and freezing temperatures of the deep-sea trenches people imagine it hiding in. The exact environment the myth depends on is the one place the science says it almost certainly never lived. So if it's not hiding in some unexplored abyssal trench, and there's no fossil or feeding evidence anywhere in the shallow coastal waters it actually preferred, the math gets pretty difficult to argue with. Which brings up the real question worth asking here. Not, is it still alive? Because the evidence on that is about as settled as science gets. The real question is, why do so many people want it to be true? And honestly, that part isn't hard to understand. Megalodon occupies this strange cultural space where it's real enough to feel possible, real enough that you can hold a fossilized tooth the size of your hand in a museum, but ancient enough to still feel mysterious. Add a few blockbuster movies, a sensationalized TV special with a thin disclaimer nobody read, and a genuine human love of what if something huge is still out there, and you get a myth that's stuck around for over a decade, no matter how many actual marine biologists patiently explain otherwise. There's something a little poetic about it too. The real story of Megalodon doesn't need any fake evidence to be impressive. This was an animal whose bite force may have rivaled or exceeded a Tyrannosaurus rex, whose teeth alone, fossilized and scattered across the planet, tell a 16-million-year story of dominance before changing oceans, shifting prey, and rising competition from smaller, more efficient predators like the great white shark finally caught up with it. That's not a disappointing ending. That's just how extinction actually works, slowly, biologically, without a villain or a cover-up required. So the next time Shark Week rolls around or a shaky video claiming to show a 50-foot shark shows up in your feed, you'll know exactly what you're looking at. Not a creature hiding in the deep. Just a very old, very good story that people keep telling because the real ending, an animal that ruled the oceans for 16 million years and then simply couldn't keep up, was apparently never quite dramatic enough on its own. Even though if you ask any actual fossil, it clearly was. And here's something worth knowing if you scroll past one of these videos online today. The myth didn't stay stuck in 2013. It got a second wind, and it came from somewhere Discovery Channel never could have predicted. In the past few years, AI-generated images and videos have flooded social media, including dozens of supposed real footage clips of massive sharks attacking boats, washing up on beaches, or lurking near divers. Some of these videos rack up tens of millions of views before anyone fact-checks them. The giveaways are usually the same ones you'd spot in any AI-generated content. Slightly wrong proportions, water that moves a little too smoothly, shadows that don't quite line up. But by the time anyone notices, the clip has already been shared thousands of times, often with captions claiming it's real, leaked, or covered up. It's the same exact pattern as 2013, just running through a completely different machine. Back then, it was a TV network with a production budget and paid actors. Now, it's a free AI tool and an algorithm that rewards anything shocking enough to make people stop scrolling. The technology changed. The appetite for a giant shark hiding somewhere out there clearly never did. There's actually a pretty simple lesson hiding inside all of this, way beyond just one extinct shark. The most convincing fake stories rarely announce themselves as fake. They borrow the look of credibility. A lab coat, an official-sounding name, a grainy video that feels like ought to be real. Megalodon just happens to be one of the longest-running examples we have of that exact trick working again and again on a brand new generation of people every single time the format changes. So maybe the most interesting part of this whole story isn't actually the shark at all. It's how reliably we keep wanting to believe in it, no matter how the evidence gets delivered.